I believe the most common and intuitive understanding of God is that he's the first cause. While some in our culture truly believe monotheists worship a sky daddy, their spiritual blindness negates their participation in our line of thinking. God is the first cause. How do we know this about him? Well, it's clear that everything we encounter in the world seems to lack an explanation or reason for its existence. They don't self-referentially account for themselves, so there must be some ground for their existence. There's two very popular arguments against naturalism. The first one concerns the immediate certainty of non-physical reality, i.e. the conscious experience of the world, which so self-evidently refutes naturalism that it's often ignored. The law of identity, even in its most abstract form, proves the irreducibility of experience to natural processes. There is no reality in the brain that is experience, so experience is not neurons firing in the physical brain. Experience qua experience is something irreducible to natural phenomena, and has its own reality as the substance of our inner life as free and rational beings. Connected to the ontological failure of naturalism is its epistemic corollary, most popularly argued by C.S. Lewis in Miracles. The basic thrust of the second argument against naturalism, known as the argument from reason, is that any argument is itself non-naturalistic, i.e., it consists of a self-reflexive reason and not merely a mindless and ultimately random process of particles interacting. Natural forces and particles possess no self-reflexivity and know nothing of reasons, subject only to spontaneous physical processes. Thus, to argue for naturalism is self-refuting, as it consists of providing a reason for a worldview that negates the possibility of reasoning. There's a third limitation of naturalism that's only intelligible in light of the communal ontology. It begins not by doubting naturalism's ability to account for its presuppositions, but by analyzing the content of reality as disclosed in the immediacy of sensory experience. We know intuitively that reality follows a set of patterns, the most fundamental being cause and effect. It's the basis for all intelligibility and our capacity as physical beings to exist in a familiar, safe, and ordered world. Analyzing causes and effects reveals a vast tapestry of relations in their splendor, all of which ultimately point to God as the self-actualized and living ground of creation. Every object and event finds itself within an interconnected network of objects and events through space and time. No thing is ever self-isolated, as everything receives its being through communion with another, who has in turn received their being through communion. Causes and effects are equal to reason and reality, respectively. A cause is the reason for the existence of the effect. For example, biting one's lip is the cause or reason for one's mild annoyance. However, upon reflection, it becomes clear that annoyance is not accounted for solely by the cause, but already existed in potential, in the teeth, in the nervous system, the brain, and the entirety of the human body. Thus, we revise our understanding of cause and effect as a particular force, cause, exerting itself upon an object with pre-existing properties leading to a change within the object, effect. We then hastily conclude that annoyance is merely the result of the properties of the human being in communication with the particular force. For practical purposes, we must accept, in a manner not purely arbitrary, that certain causes lead to certain effects consistently, which requires a reduction of the complexities of the infinite web of relations within a given here and now. The temptation is to universalize this pragmatic reduction into metaphysical accounts of reality, thereby obscuring the inner relation of all parts of reality with one another. If we do this, we fail to see the essentially communal nature of all reality, and fall into abstractions that isolate entities into atoms, moments, and data points. The reduction into here and now allows for a specific cause and a specific effect to be isolated or abstracted and brought present to hand. But in the grander scheme of things, this abstraction hasn't answered the fundamental question that's the basis of cause and effect in general. What is the reason or explanation for or of reality? In reducing annoyance to being merely the product of one particular force or cause acting upon one particular set of properties is to, metaphysically speaking, pass the burden of reality's ground onto the causes of both. We're left with an unending series of events, a bad infinity, and we're on the run, attempting to find a first cause to ground and explain the totality of relations that are utterly contingent upon one another. Since no cause or effect possesses an account of themselves in themselves, they're necessarily dependent upon what lies beyond them. But within a purely naturalistic framework, any attempt to pierce into the beyond only leads to a vain repetition of contingent natural phenomena. At no point can the naturalist discover the first relation or first giver that is ontologically necessitated by the contingency of all entities upon each other. If everything is contingent upon another for their being, there must be a source or ground of every contingent being that's self-actualized and not contingent upon the world. The self-actualized first giver is God. And I don't want to discount the usefulness and necessity of natural science, but my argument is that naturalism necessarily ends in an illogical and impossible infinite regression. The naturalist description of reality is, in truth, ontologically impossible. The only possible solution other than creationism is monism, which we'll discuss in another post. Saint Sophrony of Essex writes in We Shall See Him As He Is, quote, "It has been granted to me to contemplate different kinds of light and lights. The light the artist knows when elated by the beauty of the visible world, the light of philosophical contemplation that develops into a mystical experience. Let us even include the light of scientific knowledge, which is always and inevitably of very relative value. I've been tempted by manifestations of light from hostile spirits." Unquote. The light of scientific knowledge consists of the revelation of the eternal logi of creatures, i.e. the inner rationality of the created world. However, St. Sophrony is quick to note that these are relative lights, in the precise sense that they only have meaning or significance in relation to the eternal light of the triune God. Aside from true love, any human activity is idolatrous when taken as its own self-defining end. The contemplation of the beauty and splendor of God's creation is nothing idolatrous in itself. Still, when abstracted from its proper place within the hierarchy of human activities, it becomes a stumbling block to the vision of the light of the personal God. But suppose scientific knowledge is understood as inherently relative to the knowledge of God as the I Am. In that case, it becomes a means of demonstrating both the existence and, perhaps more importantly, the character of the God who created us, rather than obscuring the most primordial and essential truth of our being.